What's going on there, Workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and it is actually already time to be looking towards E3 and what that means for Final Fantasy XIV's future live letter. Now with this, they're going to go ahead and be asking some questions. The thread is already live, link in the description below. Let's go ahead and see what people are already asking. Now the thread hasn't been up for long, but I think there's already a couple of really interesting questions here, and I'd love to just touch on kind of whether or not these are questions I think they should ask and kind of where I'd love to see this thread go from here. Maybe you guys have some ideas and you can post your thoughts right here on the thread and they'll get answered at E3. Who knows? So the first question is that they're looking forward to the new Deep Dungeon and Eureka, and but they're already done with all the patch stuff. And so basically, long story short, they say, could you please consider including some more of this time-consuming content in the base patch in the future? And I absolutely agree with that. They kind of hinted that Deep Dungeon would be dropped at the time of 4.3, and then as it got closer, you know, there was kind of a little bit of a feeling that maybe it wouldn't be ready on time, and then of course it was not. And if you guys are like me, outside of maybe the bulk of people haven't cleared Savage, but the raid was a blast, did that week one. The trial was a blast, did that week one. The dungeon, while it is fun, it is not horribly difficult. Do that week one. Okay, story, you're cranking through your Namatsu. What else are you doing right now? And it already feels like 4.2 again. So I know we're getting kind of 4.31 this week, and so for those kind of endgame people, that's going to mean something. But otherwise, the rest of us are sitting around until 4.35, repeating this content, hoping it doesn't get boring. So if we move on to the next question, you recently made changes to Astrologian and Scholar, blah, blah, blah. However, White Mage still has the Lily system, which most players ignore. And I hear you guys play White Mage all the time wishing, man, how do I get that like totally off my screen? I literally don't even pay attention to it. We have fewer skills than the other healers, but still have unusable skills like Repose and Fluid Aura. Astrologians are catching up to us in personal damage after the latest change, and it has me worried because this is one of the places where we could excel. Are you planning to make any large changes to White Mages? So honestly, you're always going to see balance questions on these threads, and if you guys have them, definitely feel free to answer them, but definitely feel free to ask them, but don't expect them to get answered, because they really never go over much in the first live letter as far as balance changes. They're very, very loose. The second time, they're still very, very loose. They drill it down a little bit more in what the goal is, but not always the final numbers, and then those patch notes are what tells us, and there's never going to be a point where all the classes are exactly happy. So where are the Diable Ultima Horns and similar Diables at? I think as we move towards a better glamour system, which we've been getting, you're going to see more and more Diable things. So that's a fine thing to wonder about. I think it's a waste of a question in this forum. And so I don't know how you guys feel about that, but when you ask questions like, can I get this specific glamour? Can I, especially when you ask things like yes or no, or very specific, where are the Diable Horns? Instead of making that a more general question, as we move into a deeper, more balanced glamour system, is it going to be possible to make more and more items Diable? And if so, how is that going to be built into that interface? To kind of get them thinking, okay, how can we explain to you what our long-term plans for glamour as a whole is, and not just, oh, well, I have this one piece of gear I really like and I wish I could make it a different color. So if we keep kind of skipping on down here, the Domain reconstruction is intriguing as a concept. Being able to have a hand in the reconstruction of a settlement is compelling. Will this system be used anymore in the future as a way to describe the rebuild of a settlement over the system used before construction of Revenant's Toll and Idleshire? How you do a reconstruction and how that ties into the story as the story progresses is an interesting idea, because if we end up using the same zone, right, if we end up watching this Domain reconstruction go all the way to completion, then is that phased for new players, or is that something that just disappears for new players, or is that something that we can fuel this kind of infinite scalable, you're rebuilding all of whatever, and in which case, where is all this damage and how are we going to get to see the results of that reconstruction? So I don't know that they would, I guess, spoil any of the lore for us, but it is intriguing to see, okay, how are you making this mechanic scalable, and how is this going to be something long lasting, so that we don't have, for example, something like Diadem, where you have this thing that just becomes so irrelevant that new players aren't even going to know what it is. And I think a similar question could be geared towards Eureka. How are you going to keep this relevant? if we jump on down, you'll see there's already multiple pages, and so let's just jump over to page 3. And can we get to do more things underwater? This expansion geared a ton towards underwater. The submarines instead of airships, Ruby Sea. And the question is, what exactly does that mean, right? We're getting to go down there and there's gigging for fishing, but if you're not a gatherer, underwater feels really clunky. It feels really underutilized, and I would love to see them do more. Maybe an underwater dungeon that was done well. I'm hesitant to ask for one, really hoping they do it, because if it's not done well, it could be a huge pain to get in your duty roulette. And then you start to see goofy questions like how much do Gosetsu's sword actually cost and things like this. And this is where this will usually start to drop down, and you'll start to see questions that we've had before. Things like Eggy Glamours. They've been saying we're going to get them for a long time. Questions like, where's the companion app? You told us we were getting a companion app. We still don't have one. Things like, when are you rebooting the achievement system? There's going to always be balance questions, lore questions, goofy questions, and really those specific questions. And so I kind of just wondered, what do you guys think 4.3 is missing? I think that we kind of had a chance to talk about it in our podcast if you haven't seen that with Amriel. 4.3 is a great base for where 4.4 is, and I think it brought up the water level so it's a little more even as an expansion, where there were kind of some gaps through 4.1 and 4.2 that was making it feel a little empty. But unfortunately, that meant that 4.3 had to be more of a gap filler and less of a full patch of its own. And so there was very little risk taken, there was very little surprise, and overall, once you're caught up, it's kind of like, okay, I'm happy with it, but you're not giving me anything that makes me want to play extra. You're not giving me anything that wants me to beg my friends to come play this game with me. And so I guess I don't know exactly what my questions are and what you guys would have, but what are the kind of questions we can ask to understand where the game is going and what they're going to get us excited about? Those are the questions that I would love to see answered at E3. I would love to know what kind of questions you guys would love to, see at E3. Definitely start that conversation in the comments below, but if you can have the ability to drop it into a succinct question that you think would be fantastic if they ask, be sure you guys do not hesitate to go over those forums and post it. There's pages and pages of these. They're going to pull a few from it. It'd be awesome if yours made it on there. And if yours does make it on there, hopefully it's a question that's, not so general they can just shrug it off, but not so specific that if it gets answered, it's only really answering what you wondered, and not anybody who's like, hey, what about this chess piece? And they answer that, and then there's somebody over here like, what about my leg piece? Like, try to think about the question a little more, and how does it affect the population as a whole, and what is the specific problem that you're trying to drill down to? So it is definitely that time again, hoping to get some good feedback going into E3 from 14, not to mention all the other great Square-Enix news we expect. Hope you guys are having a fantastic week. This has been Chris with Work to Game. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. Hey you, especially if you're a new face, welcome to the workforce. If you want to hit that subscribe button to say you like us, we'd really appreciate it, but there's a little bell next to it if you really like a channel, and you can go ahead and hit that if you'd like to be notified. Be sure that if that thing lets you know, hey, do you always want to be notified, or you just sometimes want to be notified, that you tell it, oh man, I actually meant by notified. So why don't you give that a click, and we hope to see you around in our next video.